This is Big Man Tyrone, and you're about to watch the MtG Cabal cast with your hosts, Woad, Thirsty, and Reptar. Sub to us on all your podcast networks at MtG Cabal Cast and YouTube.
Welcome to the newest episode of the Cabal Cast. This week we're going to be a little more personal with our topic. Mm-hmm. It's something that I think a lot of people realize when they first get into, but as time goes by, they kind of lose perspective and become that jaded vendor persona. So what we're talking about is basically why we do this. Yep. What got us into vending in the first place, what we find rewarding about it. Reptar is going to go from the vendor perspective. I'm going to go from the LGS perspective. And this was kind of prompted by James on Twitter, had a conversation where basically someone said something about, my LGS is doing this wrong. And it started on a long conversation with a back and forth about what it takes to own an LGS and how it's not necessarily all it's cracked up to be. Mm-hmm. And, same as being a vendor, as we've kind of covered before. It's not necessarily all it's cracked up to be. And I think it's important to kind of keep perspective on what helps us enjoy that. Mm-hmm. And that's what we're doing. So let's get started.
Okay. We kind of broke it down into two bullet points. What drew us to our respective roles in the industry, and then what are the kind of pros or cons, like the draw to kind of keeping with it. And I don't have any LGS experience in regards to working at or for an LGS. I've only worked for a large vendor. Did not actually open the LGS I thought I was going to this year, thankfully.
Yeah.
That was the happiest
on that one.
Yeah, that was the happiest accident ever. But the draw to the vendor thing was really kind of the intrigue around the world as a whole. Growing up, I didn't have access to dedicated card shops. We talked about this before. It was just sports card stores that had Magic, maybe singles here and there. This store was located in a town that was basically just built around a number of schools, and so it catered to whatever card games were coming out. So I bought my Pokemon and my Magic at the same store, singles and packs. And that was my experience. Once I moved to college and found out there was more beyond just F&M, I started traveling and I got to see vendors in New England, and I got to see some of the heavy hitters back in the day. Gaming Etc's up there. They're part of the Etc brand. Andy Stokes' original game store was up there. Rob Doherty ran a store up there where a number of pros came out of. Darwin Castle came out of there. Eventually I found out about what people term Toget in New Jersey, the only game in town in Somerville. That's where Osip Lebedovitz, Patrick Sullivan, AJ, I can't remember his name. He's an L2 now. Used to be a Storm aficionado. Wrote about it for Star City. Came out of there. And the kind of mystique that was a game store and the traveling game store and the vendor. And eventually playing around the area, started actually playing at real game stores. And one of my friends moved into a position with a large vendor and was doing a regionals up here. And I just straight shot. I was like, yo, can I help? What do you have? And he's like, yeah, we could use a sales associate, and it's cheaper to just have somebody drive the 3 hours to Boston than it will be to fly somebody in. So come on down, you'll just sell. I was like, all right, fine, cool. And that was kind of it. And I learned a lot in that first regionals. I think it was shortly after New Phyrexia release, so there was a lot of side event cracking packs and selling cards. And we had a really interesting conversation about what the vendor was and the community that came with that I learned about in that experience. So at first it was just that draw of a traveling retail experience and how you are trying to be better than everybody else in the room in regards to pricing on the buy and sell, in terms of customer service, which is huge, again, on the buy and sell, presentation of yourself, your product, representation of the brand, etc. And it was super interesting because it was just something I'd never grown accustomed to, and I'd been playing this game for years, and it just felt like, well, I keep playing it forever. This is something I'm interested in as well. I wonder if there's also a future in, moving into an organization. And lo, I did. But that was kind of it initially.
It was pretty similar to me. I growing up in St. Louis, same deal. Back then, you didn't have dedicated magic shops. You had your sports card or your hobby town, and that was where you had F&M.
Mm-hmm.
I was kind of fortunate in that, being from St. Louis, eventually there came to be a name in Magic that towered over every other name, being Ogre.
Yep.
From St. Louis, had his store, walked in one day and felt like, man, this is great. Without getting into details about the shady underbelly of when it first started, but the glory days, so to speak, it felt like a family, kind of. It was a lot of people that shared this passion for the game. There was a large vintage community there, courtesy of Roman, creator of Uba Stacks, the archetype way back in the day in Vintage, and it felt like here was this thing that I'd liked and loved for so long and was such a huge part of my life, and all of a sudden, man, there's these people that are just as passionate.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like buying into that community.
Yes.
And recognizing that this is a place where I belong, I feel welcome, and kind of recognizing, because at the time I hadn't started like actually grinding to try to be on the GP or Pro Tour circuit. So that was when I first recognized I could walk into a room where an event like this is happening and immediately have something in common with 90% of the people in that room. And that it was a conversation I could have with no words, just by pointing cards at, here's my murderous writer, getting your Vivian or something. And you can communicate wordlessly like that. And recognizing that was kind of what drew me into the LGS scene. And eventually, similarly, I was like, hey, you need something? And they said, yeah, we need someone to pick bulk. And that was how I started, as a bulk picker.
Always the worthwhile role. Yeah.
Incredibly, yes. And that was kind of what got me into it to begin with, was just the desire to be a part of that community.
I think it's really important to note, it's something I have under the draws as well, is kind of learning what the events are like behind the scenes, and eventually you learn that you'll find the same people at all the events, especially from the vendor perspective. It was a little more obvious before than it was now when you had the same vendor showing up all the time. I love that CFB was looking to bring in new blood, even if it was at the cost of, like, the monetary cost of booths, and also bringing in local stores that don't have the opportunity to, by reducing their cost because everybody else is paying a little more, and giving people that opportunity to kind of, join the club. And I didn't realize that was a thing until I'd been vending Magic events for maybe a year or two. At that point in time, for the vendors that were on the GP circuit, you're there as a group of 3 to 6. It's very easy to learn people's names, and you just kind of float into the conversation and become a member of, I'm going to use the word club, and that's kind of incorrect. Family isn't correct either. Family doesn't often go to a strip club, but they're
in that case they do.
Make of it what you will. Look, it was somebody had a birthday and you went to Red Steakhouse and a strip joint in Miami. What? You can't complain.
It's like a hybrid of the two, because you have this like shared bonded experience over, just destroying people at the vendor booth all weekend. But you also, you travel together, you work together for 12 hours a day for 4 days a week.
Oh, yeah.
Multiple times. So it becomes like a work family.
Yeah, and I'm super happy to represent any company that offers to contract me. And I've been stopped a number of times in airports asking like what the company I did work for, because I will wear any hoodie or any t-shirt that I'm given. Part of my contract for the first time I work with a company is that if you have a hoodie it will be there for me on site.
Yeah.
Like it, because I love that part of it, the camaraderie, and I think that goes kind of unspoken in the industry because nobody really, talks about it. There are a lot of lone wolves, not a lot of larger vendors, do something like this, so you miss out on that and what happens behind the scenes. So
yeah,
I'm glad you did bring that up.
And it's so that was how I started in it, and when I really got into it was actually similar through Ogres. Took a break from Magic, came back, helped Ogre run Ogres for a brief period. After Theft went down there, everyone pretty much scattered from it because they realized, wait, this might not be the best idea.
Yep.
So take a break, and I came back, and I actually opened up Moonbase with one of the people who was managing Ogres prior to me taking it over. And that was when it kind of finally became like, look, I want to be 100% responsible for building and cultivating this community.
Yep.
I want it to be a welcoming place. I want to have that camaraderie. I want to see the fruits of my labor become this great thing. And I think something a lot of people recognize as that desire. What a lot of people don't recognize, I think, when they get into the industry, and this is something that James touched on in his tweets, is how much work that takes.
Oh, yeah.
And that you're working 60, 70-hour weeks. And when you first start, and you're doing it for no extra pay, because it's what you have to do to do this thing you love.
Oh, absolutely.
And that does take a toll.
Yeah.
Because you have less time for your friends, for your family, for your loved ones, whatever. And I think a lot of people, when they look at their LGS, they may see, all of these shiny lights, and they don't necessarily see the work that goes into it. And
think about this.
I think
you're an LGS, and you're selling on an online platform. At some point during the day, somebody's got to start pulling orders from the day previous. Does that happen during the next day, during business hours, and now you've got an employee tied up that can't help a customer? Or do they have to do it before the store opens? This is just one of those decisions where you have to figure out what is your actual operating hours internally and then for the public.
Yeah, and that adds up. That's kind of, it does. And that's part of what has kept me in the industry, although I've taken a step back from the LGS side, is the toll in those hours. And it's something that I think everyone eventually, at the vendor level, at whatever, you have to find your happy medium between the two.
Oh, yeah.
And the reason I've kept with it is, as many pros have even touched on, is less Magic, more The Gathering. And not the greatest Magic the Gathering themed hip-hop group of all time, fronted by one Patrick Chapin, but the collective grouping and that community.
Mm-hmm.
And, honestly, part of it is, and I think probably for you as well, when you get involved in the vendor lifestyle, especially coming from St. Louis and seeing Ogre, if you needed something, he was who you went to.
Mm-hmm.
Every single time. You need something, Ogre has it, guaranteed. And there was always something really cool about being that guy.
Yep. Yeah.
And that was what drew me into it as well, was seeing like, well, if anybody needs something, this is the place they go.
Mm-hmm.
They want to play with the best players, this is the place they go. They want the best selection and best prices, that's where they go.
Yep.
And there is a little bit of, the desire to like, all right, I'm going to travel to a show, and I still do it. I'll tell people, hey, I'm going to this event. Give me a list of cards you need. I'll come back with them. We'll work out a deal.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something that, every vendor knows, every vendor does, especially the freelance guys like you and I. I come in, I'm like, look, here's the list of stuff my locals are looking for. I'll take payment in these cards. Fine. And it's such a cool feeling to be able to provide that service.
Yeah.
To people, and that's part of what has kept me further into the industry.
Mm-hmm.
Is the desire and willingness to be that guy.
Oh yeah, no, it's nice, and that's kind of what I've always wanted to do at the vendor level. Online is online. That's one thing. targeting specifically for events and having the right cards for events is always something that I've wanted to be able to do better or more of given the opportunity, because that in and of itself is a skill set.
Yeah.
Was it not Niagara? There was another Legacy GP. Was it SeaTac after Niagara?
Yeah.
I got an email from a vendor from their Magic specialist for the show, and they just said, "What is Legacy right now?" And I wrote back a 3-page article, and I knew the question was, "What do I bring?" Not just what was Legacy. So I just went down like, this is the meta. This is what people are like to play the deck that day. This is what you're going to want to bring. Yeah. Quantity wise, up to you. And then this is what people are going to be playing against that. I would focus here as well, and then drifting down. And I like that role. But similar to you, like just being able to say, okay, we're going to this event. This is what we know we have to bring. Do it. The only time it absolutely scrambles my brain is a limited event. It's like, what do you bring to a limited event? Fuck it.
EDH.
Yeah, exactly. And like some format staples. And if you want to call like fetches and duels format staples, shocks, etc., they're still EDH cards at their heart. So it's just like, I don't know. And I think that's also kind of what keeps me in it as well, is a part of the customer service aspect. Traveling around and talking to people and learning about how they play and enjoy the game, and working with somebody at the booth and giving them kind of a tailored experience, but also learning a little bit more about the game and how people see it themselves is something that keeps me interested in coming back and being a vendor. It's not just seeing the people I know. It's not just working insane hours or being able to go to some of these events and have a blast. It is being able to work with people all around the country and learn more about them. In Vegas, I learned about a store in Florida and how it crushed the competition. Like, that's the kind of stuff that I enjoy.
And it's, something I think a lot of players don't necessarily recognize either is, and vendors too, honestly, the appreciation for like the quiet moments after the day's done, when you're just sitting around a table with a bunch of vendors from the same booth, different booths, whatever, and you're just all exhausted.
Oh yeah.
None of you want to talk about Magic, so all you do is just shit on each other for an entire dinner.
Yep.
It's so cathartic.
It really is. The first Grand Prix, because it was still a Grand Prix I went to when I started dating my now wife, she'd asked me prior, like, what do you do at these events as a vendor? And I explained it, and she was like, okay, sure, I guess. And she played the game, and she'd seen me vend locally. But what I sent her was the bill from the steakhouse that we went to on the aforementioned trip that didn't include the alcohol. That was on a separate tab. 2 different people wanted a credit card.
Pay for alcohol, yeah.
Well, no, they just wanted a credit card game, different things, because they started drinking at the bar because there was a wait. So yeah. And it was like a $1,400 tab. And I just sent a photo of that, and I said, this is what we do.
Yeah.
We eat and we shit on each other, like you said, and that's it. That is most nights at the end of an event. Saturday specifically is usually when it happens. That's when you have your big meal, because Sunday's kind of a coast day.
Yeah, you can go in late, you're leaving early, you're not doing a whole lot.
Yeah.
So that's...
Generally speaking, every vendor in the room knows exactly what Sunday's going to be, because it's exactly the same as every other Sunday at every other event. All you have to do is prepare yourself for the people who want to haggle, because they know everybody is there to haggle. And ensure that you either have your signage out that you will be cutting deals or not, and then fucking pack it up when you see fit.
Yeah.
Sunday's super easy. But yeah, it's that camaraderie, that bond that you get. One of the interesting things that not a lot of people get to see, even from an LGS perspective, as a vendor, is when you get out to events that aren't Magic related. I've mentioned going to anime conventions and other things like that, PAX here and there. I haven't gone to NYCC as a vendor yet. I'm trying.
I've done NYCC, SDCC, and Gen Con, and I can honestly say Gen Con is the worst slash best.
Gen Con and SDCC kind of don't fall into these paradigms because there's just so many fucking people there. NYC is such a large city, so it's easy to spread out, even if you want to get into Jersey. But like these days start really late compared to a Magic Fest and end really early in comparison to a Magic Fest. So instead of you might work 4 or 5 days in a row, but you're working human hours. You're working 6 to 8 hours, something you've been tempered with, not 13 for 3 in a row or more because you were also there on Thursday setting up your entire booth. Comic-Cons, etc., all have teams that will put your booth together for you as long as you give them the planograms if you need it. And like all your hardware and stuff if you're bringing a big display or whatever. And you just roll your vehicle right up to your booth, dump everything out, pack it back in the same way. And you leave everything there because the cons have security. Everything stays. Nothing comes with you aside from your cash box and then whatever else you want to bring with you. And then you leave at like 6.
Yeah.
And great. And you just get to really enjoy your evening. It's the only time I've ever left an event, had dinner, and just gone swimming afterwards. Yeah. Was ASEN in Chicago.
ASEN's great.
Oh, it was amazing. And even waiting with the entire rest of the con to get, Giordano's Pizza. We sat in the parking lot running our sales numbers, just doing busy work while we were waiting for our order. Got it, ate, back at the hotel, and then went swimming. Like, that's the kind of stuff not a lot of other vendors get to experience because they don't do these other cons. But that's one of the reasons why I keep contracting with the handful of people that I do, is because they do more than just Magic Fests. They do other types of events, and those are also super interesting to learn about as well and to see what's going on and kind of see how they operate. I didn't know if the Final Fantasy card game had an actual player following. I thought it was just like Pokemon for the most part, which is by look only. And that kind of stuff is super duper interesting. The degenerates who love to gamble on things like revised packs, they show up.
I'm so mad that I was turned down to flip it or rip it a Sealed Legends pack at Vegas the year that we both went. Mm-hmm. So mad.
Did Oh, that's right. Because you wanted to do it on live stream, didn't you? With Graded?
With Russo.
Yeah. Did Hatsa stop him? Or
no, he wouldn't do it.
Oh, that's okay. Funny.
Yeah.
Because Bruce...
Hatsa loves that stuff. Are you kidding?
I know. That's why I thought, if you asked Hatsa, he would have definitely said yes, but I feel like Brusso would have finished your sentence.
Yeah. But yeah, that's the stuff I love. I mean, we used to bet on stuff in the room.
Oh yeah.
Because that's what you do to pass the time when you're slow.
I don't know if you can tell a story like this or not, so I'll leave out names and vendors. But if you ever hear a quarter go flying across the room and it sounds like it landed at a vendor booth, that is one vendor betting another vendor, heads or tails, for 50s.
Yep, that it is.
That happens.
Pretty great.
Yeah. I've put up a bet with somebody before about the first deck they would be sold in full at a modern GP at round 5, because that's usually like the round.
And that's what's kept us in it.
Yeah.
For me, as some of you may not know, I left Moonbase. And I started doing strictly the GP vendor thing. Mm-hmm. So why leave the LGS, this, grail project that I kind of, fell in love with and became my drive in life? And that's kind of, what I touched on and what, James touched on in his tweets is it wears on you because it does take a lot out because you have those long hours, because it takes a special kind of person to run that LGS as effectively a sole proprietorship, where you may have a few employees, but realistically when stuff really gets bad, you're going to be the one that has to go in because they can't. You pay them hourly. You don't want to pay them overtime, and you also don't want to put too much work on their plates because you're the owner and it should fall on you. And eventually it just got to be too much, and I was like, you know what? This is it. I found the balance in being a vendor, and that's just what I want to do. That's where I'm headed, that's where I'm going, and that's my thing.
Yep.
And that's basically where I'm at now. That's why you can find me at booths at Star Cities and GPs if they ever happen again. Who knows?
Yeah. I'll tell you, I don't think I would have survived at an LGS in any capacity back when I started becoming a vendor. The idea of the split for the LGS that we were thinking of is still appealing for different reasons, but I don't think I'd be able to work at anywhere else where we weren't in full control of everything down to precise location. But being a vendor and doing these trips has been a lot easier than anything else. But if I needed to do back-to-backs for a month or two, that would be the killer.
That's rough.
That's when you generally see like some haggard vendors. I don't know how Alex from CFB does it as often as he does. Sasso,
that dude's a machine.
These guys are out there at almost every CFB or every other CFB event, or were, when they were happening. And that's kind of I don't want to call it the dark side or the downside, but that's really what it is you have 3 or 4, probably 3 13-hour days and a fourth 3 or 4 hour day, and that's to get the booth set up. So that's Thursday to Sunday, and that gives you Monday to Wednesday to fly back to where you were and then out again. So with those few days, I've never asked Alex. I've gone out to dinner with him a bunch. I don't know what he does in between, whether he stays in one location or he flies to the next. But going back home for 3 days is not an option. It's going to sound weird to say this, but it's kind of a blessing and a curse where Troll and Toad is located in southeastern Kentucky. It's an hour to any airport, but they have the ability to drive 5 hours to Chicago, I think 3 or 4 down into Texas. Orlando is 8. They fly to Cali. Like, whatever latitude they're on within the U.S. is great for that kind of travel, so it makes it a lot more palatable as opposed to going from coast to coast. That's a killer. Like, for you, it might be a little easy as well if you cut out the East Coast and say you went a couple hours over.
You can get Chicago, Indy, Ohio, Michigan, Kentucky, Tennessee. Any of the Midwest spots are easy to get to, and it's we have an airport here that goes pretty much anywhere, so that kind of makes it easier.
Exactly.
But still,
so you should be able to direct into Orlando, New York City, Baltimore, Boston, anywhere on the East Coast. There would be a worthwhile event you can just direct shot into. Yeah,
which helps.
That if I had to do that might push me out of being a vendor. When I was working with Face, despite the fact that I did the second half of the year with them, this was once a month. So it was super easy to handle all those days off and all that flying and all that travel. So it didn't really affect me at all being gone for 4 days or whatever and then coming back, because I had the rest of the month to be back home and actually work. When you're home and you get to sleep in your own bed maybe 2 nights a week before you're out again, that does wear as well. That's kind of the downside to being a full-time sales or sales associate or buyer.
GP, whatever,
Like, for somebody like Bernie, who runs Moose, he's been at every GP almost for the last how many years as well. That.
And they, there's a lot of like Tails, Moose. They do like a 3-on, 2-off rotation. Mm-hmm. So you're still traveling for a few weeks consecutively, but it's not like you have a week off and then you're back. You get 2 to 3 weeks off, and then, all right, rest up and try to rotate staff. That's why on some of the really big booths like Tails, you'll see 3 or 4 people that are there at every booth, but the other 5 or 6 rotate in and out.
Yep. Yeah.
Because it takes a very special person to be able to travel that much. And part of, sticking with it as being that type of person. And a lot of times it's the owners. Mm-hmm. They want to be there. They want to represent the brand as they should.
Yeah.
But that's why you get that rotation a lot of times of people off and on.
Yeah. So. Also, there's a lot of cleanup that goes with a GP vendor, and I don't mean like the booth wise. I mean actually taking care of business in regards to your finances. Everything needs to be sorted, priced, and possibly entered into the system before it either comes back with you or gets mailed out if you're going to the next GP and you're just sending your buys somewhere else. Or you're sending them home with somebody and you're getting new crew for the next event. So there's always work to be done while you're out there at a GP and Magic Fest, and even at a con. You just have more time to do it when you're at an anime con and all those hours, because you'll be at the event sometime between 9 and 10 a.m. because doors don't open until 10 or 11 a.m. That means you have up until like 1 a.m. to get to eat, relax, and get this stuff done and set up for the next day. At a Magic Fest, you're up at 6 a.m. to be there at 7 a.m. because doors are whatever 8, and then you're not out there until the last tables are done, which means you then have to find 9. You have to find some place to eat. Hopefully it's open. That generally takes an hour or two.
It's not in Madison.
So at that point, it's close to midnight, and you have 6 hours to get all that work done while you're at the event.
Yeah,
it doesn't work out that well. Sundays can be a little bit better, like I said, because day ends early, but there's still that kind of cleanup that needs to be done, and that's the work that really grinds. And like that I couldn't do. That would be That's the biggest con. It would be the constant travel and the work that comes with it. I could do like 2 a month, I think.
Well, and that's why you'll see vendors like Cool Stuff and Mini pack up early on Sunday.
Yep.
That's their warehouse employees. So they're going back to work on Monday. Yep. So, when I would be there and we'd leave a GP at like 2 or 3, sure, everyone's like, oh, look at them. They're missing out on all the sales. And then the other half is like, God, I wish I could go home right now.
Oh, yeah.
But, we get home. We drive everything back to the store. We clock out. And then we have to be back at work the next morning. So it's the same thing of like that constant grind. Mm-hmm. And some people find that incredibly rewarding, and I applaud them because I could not possibly ever do that.
Oh, yeah, it is difficult. But it's not to say that it's not all bad, it's not all good either. No. It's something you have to take in stride, and we do this for similar reasons, it seems. So there's definitely things to look out for here, and don't be dissuaded if you were thinking about this. If you're either at the LGS level, that's the job for you, or you wanted to work for a vendor with a warehouse and look to be a sales associate, a buyer, a specialist, what have you, and actually look to travel. It is rewarding, it is doable, and oftentimes it is a little bit more about who you know than what you know, but it is eminently attainable if it's something you're interested in.
Yeah. Picks?
Absolutely.
You got anything else?
No, I'm good. I'm good for picks.
All right.
You want me to go first?
I'll go.
All right.
So my pick this week is Showcase Murderous Rider. My, what an odd choice. Well, it's just coming off an all-time low. The Showcase cards from Throne are honestly, in my opinion, the best alternate art, alternate frame, whatever special, stupid thing they're doing with every set now is. I've kind of been on a run of these lately, as you may have learned as well. It's also one of the premier pieces of removal in Standard for a while now.
Yep.
It's currently not seeing a whole lot of play. But what is seeing a lot of play is planeswalkers and really efficient dudes. Mm-hmm. This does a decent job of answering both. Granted, at 3 mana, you could play Rotting Regisaur and be very aggressive. I think, however, there's an opportunity for a more mid-range style deck in Gruul, probably, because you can't play Standard right now and not play green. Or maybe Jund, just not Jund Sacrifice. But I think this card is really well positioned in the Standard meta. Modern meta, Legacy meta,
Yeah.
I also think it is a really good recurable effect to have.
Yes.
Especially in something like EDH, where there's problem creatures and problem planeswalkers. This solves both, and it goes back into your library once it dies. And I think that this art is also one of the better arts of all of the showcase cards, not just Throne. So I think at about $250, you can probably pick it up and trade for $1 to $2. Great. I think within the next 8 months to a year, this card easily reaches a $5 buy list. Granted, there were a lot of print issues with Throne because of the war sheets and everything else, so print run may be a little off. But I think this is, especially as Throne is concerned, the most well-positioned of all of these showcase cards. And I think that it is the least likely to be banned forever, like everything else from that set, or the last 5 years of Magic.
Yeah.
Awful. I think it's a really opportune time as well, because right now there is such little attention on paper Magic. So you've probably got some LGSs that are sitting on these in their cases that have been there from when it was the best card in Standard.
Yeah.
Or in their binders, whatever they have. And I think going in and trading in something like, there's people paying 50 cents on Modern Horizons Snowlands. It's great. If you can get that in an LGS, dump them for something like this. I don't think, unless you're moving in mass on TCG Player, there's any way that is more liquid than something like a Murderous Rider. So I just think it's well positioned, and once Modern slows down, which I hope it does, because I hope they start paying attention to anything but Arena again. I'm holding my breath on that one. I think Murderous Rider is going to be well positioned there again as well.
Agreed. I actually watched the majority of the Star City qualifier this past weekend, and the power couple of Todd Anderson and Ryan Overturf actually talked about the power couple of Murderous Rider and Scavenging Ooze in both Standard and Pioneer. And there is the green-black mid-range deck that already exists in Pioneer. We covered this a while back with a couple of our picks as well. And it didn't have Scavenging Ooze before. Now it gets Scavenging Ooze to help with a bit of the graveyard recursion, or just become an efficient threat all the way up the curve from turn 2 through turn 6, what have you. And Murderous Rider is already in the deck and slots in perfectly. And we can see that it's already seeing play. If you were to take a look at like MTG Meta or MTG decks, you can see that it is firing off in Pioneer. Generally in, right now, it looks like Jund and Mono Black for the most part in Pioneer.
Mono Blacks. Yep.
But it is definitely a card that has the ability to withstand the test of time in Pioneer, and between now and when this rotates in fall 2021, the ability to actually pick up and become not more than a role player.
Yeah.
Once we lose Wilderness Reclamation and Krasis and some of the Vivians that we have, we should see a more mid-range deck kind of form. You mentioned Gruul. It is playable. Patrick Sullivan has been championing that.
Yeah.
You don't need the Ember Cleaves to really win. You can actually play a fairly decent mid-range deck and pick up some games when you're not just facing down the same 2 or 3 decks the entire time. So Murderous Rider as a card is definitely a great pickup. And the showcase version being right now, according to stocks, almost the same price as the set version, just seems like the easy call, because it is the specialized version of the card, in foil or not.
Yeah.
And I think this is a card that'll last. It did just take an uptick, which is nice. So you can just see coming out of this weekend, where it was talked about that we're going to be heading hopefully into a positive trend for this card. So any kind of investment you could make in this, you'll see dividends on. For myself, I am going with an oldie but a goodie in Shimmermere. This is a card from Mirrodin Besieged that has flash and gives all your artifacts flash. It's a card I've been watching for a little bit now, I think close to a month, because it had a reprint Commander 2016 that made it rope for a lot longer than it needed to, if you saw if you see the price guide. But it's finally started to pick back up over the last couple of weeks, which is really nice. The market on it looks like people are telling you about $3, which is fair. CK was buying it for about $250 last week when I mentioned this, and I want to bring up the buy price real quick because it went up between when I mentioned it in our Discord and when I looked again. They're buying 24 for the same price. Okay, so it's held over the weekend.
Yeah.
But everything else has gone up from last week to this week. The interesting thing is on Rec, if you kind of skip past the top commanders here and you just look at the high synergy cards, you kind of see a tail of a card that basically fits in every artifact strategy ever in EDH. Looking at the generals is a little misleading because most of them are combo-based generals with a handful of aggro. And it's not necessarily the full picture. So if you were to believe that, then you would think this is a very niche card because the artifact combo decks are really oppressive. You're looking at things like Memnarch or Karn, Silver Golem, Emery, Psymaster Thopterist, decks that can just go. Tucked away, however, are Jorkadine and Traxos, Hope of Girapur, these really aggressive generals, so this card spans the gamut. And it's a unique effect in what we like to term mono-brown lists, where it doesn't just work like Winding Canyons. It is the artifact equivalent of Alchemist's Refuge, where it gives essentially everything in your deck the ability to be played at the end of your opponent's turn, so you can kind of untap and win there without exposing yourself too much when you pass the turn. This is the kind of card I also like with Unwinding Clock.
I also like... Yep. Okay. It's also much better than a similar effect in Vidalcan Orrery, in that it is asymmetrical.
Yeah.
Especially, as you mentioned, with Unwinding Clock, you can use artifact-based draw to continually flood the board.
Yes. For people that don't know Unwinding Clock, I'll bring it up real quick on Rec. It is effectively Seedborn Muse for artifacts. It costs 4 and it just untaps all artifacts you control. All of them, just like Seedborn Muse. So you get all your mana, all your draw effects, everything again. So when all your artifacts have flash, and you can continue to just draw through your deck with Temple Bell, etc.
Yeah.
This just helps you power out. And as WotC continues to print more cards that work better with artifacts, again, this is one of those cards that we expect to just kind of rise up and take over time. Sculpting Steel has a real price, not just because it was printed in like 2 sets that barely had print runs in Mirrodin and 10th, but because it goes in every artifact deck and copies everything from Howling Mine and Font of Mythos to like big dumb things like Darksteel Reactor or Darksteel Forge, and just give yourself a redundant copy, a Chronos Memorial, what have you.
Yeah.
We're going to see more cards that work with artifacts, and so this is going to be one of those things that's just going to continue to tick up. Obviously, with a Commander reprint, we could see another reprint either in a Master set, or if we go back again to Mirrodin, like is the rumor, and we just got a mirror in Core 2021. It was like a mana-making mirror. So, reprint equity on this is a little higher than some of my other picks, but between now and we should get the next set of sets in late Q4.
Yeah.
We'll know where we're headed in the next year. If you've moved in between now and then and they do not announce a return to Mirrodin, then I would absolutely be fine holding onto this card for at least another year and then ducking out, because there's no way this can't heads towards 5 as they keep printing cards that work with artifacts, and this continues to track on its upward trajectory that we finally started to see.
And it's... Slight aside, I really hope they don't go back to Mirrodin, because every time they go to Mirrodin, Magic dies. Anyways,
a little bit.
I agree. I think that the biggest spot probably is if we go back to Mirrodin, because we just had an Artifacts Matter commander.
Mm-hmm.
That's not a theme they visit every year.
No.
They do it every 2 to 3 years.
Correct.
So if we're not doing a return to Mirrodin, we're at return now.
Yeah. Mirrodin existed, then we besieged it, and then we would have to return to the war-torn land that we left.
Yeah. So I think that reprint-wise, I'd probably be a little bit more comfortable going in quantity on this card than I think a lot of people would, because I don't think well, I mean, who knows with the way toy releases are going now under the Magic banner, but I wouldn't see us without a return to Mirrodin getting something like this. And even if it does get reprinted, as you mentioned, it slides into that really nice broad spectrum EDH card where it has long-term appeal. It's not the type of thing that's going to just bottom out and never recover.
Exactly.
It'll bottom out for a little bit, but it'll recover. Because especially mono brown EDH is something that most people I have known have tried to experiment with at some point. Be it Kozilek, be it Karn, be it Nulamog, be it whatever. It's something that people like to do is have an artifact theme.
Yes.
When you looked at all those commanders, it runs the gamut of super heavy combo centric to just dirtily to aggressive. And I think that gives it a lot more appeal that might be a little bit more reprint proof.
Even if I wouldn't be worried too much with the reprint, because I think that brings more eyes to the card, and that just pushes off then we ascribe to the idea of there are no bad specs, it just takes longer.
Yeah.
And I'm okay with that, because I do think this card suffers from that effect. It's just like there are a number of slivers tucked away in Onslaught block that people don't remember that are outstanding and have no value compared to others, because they're just tucked away in this time capsule, and they didn't get Crypt Sliver. They didn't get reprinted in the Slivers dual deck. They didn't get a reprint in any of the core sets, and they weren't reprinted in Modern Horizons, so they just kind of hide below water. And, even if they resurface in time, once there are those additional eyes on them, you'll be fine. It will take off again, despite, the influx of new quantity. You'll be good. Because, like I said, I think this card just suffers from the lack of visibility on this card, and kind of an unwillingness to kind of go all in on it.
Yeah.
That's what I got for this week, I believe.
That's all I got, too.
All right. So that's going to be it for this week. We will be back next week with something, for sure. Definitely. Topics, yes. Topics and picks, that's what we're here for. And some jokes.
It's kind of a struggle, because Magic is kind of at a lull right now.
Yeah,
so.
The best thing that happened to me Magic related this week was when somebody on our Twitter timeline mentioned Freakazoid, and that was really it.
Yeah.
That's what got me going this week.
Great.
Or no, somebody dug up like the press release for the 93 or 94 not announcement, but like Gen Con exhibition for the Magic demo. That was pretty dope.
Yeah, that was cool.
Yeah, but aside from that,
Baron Senger, the original art, is on sale for the first time ever.
Yes.
That is a $30,000 piece at least.
Yeah, we are expecting some big numbers on that. Definitely. Yeah, Pete Venters is putting it up himself instead of going through...
well, I think he's having Mark handle it, actually.
Okay, Mark Antaro. Yeah, that makes sense. Mark is like the guy. So yeah, that'll be interesting to follow if you've seen it. It's all over the place. It's been on Twitter, Facebook. I'm sure Instagram, because Pete Venters is an artist, and thus every artist has one. But as has been the commonplace the last couple of weeks, we are in that Magic lull, and we will pump out information as we get it, either what we're seeing in Standard from the Star City stuff, which is firing all the time. Thankfully, we finally have deck lists coming through from events that matter besides Moto, FNMs. So there's always that to take interest in, and then EDH trends as always. But we are MtG Cabalcast on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Patreon, Spotify, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts. I am at Halt I Am Reptar on Twitter. You are
at Thirsty Sizzler.
We'll see you next week.